AVS Media Demo.
Hello and welcome to ibbusinessandmanagement.com. I'm Mr. Burton, site author of ibbusinessandmanagement.com and head of business at a leading independent IB World School. Today we are looking at a solely high-level topic, 5.8 project management. If you're a standard level student, then you can tune this out. 5.8 is not for you, won't be assessed. 5.8 project management. Now, this is probably the one topic in the IB Business and Management course that has taken me the longest to get my head around as a teacher of this subject. I initially found it incredibly difficult to teach, but I eventually, trial and error, have identified a few tricks to project management and network analysis. So, tune in, take some notes. You will need a pencil and some paper handy for this one. I'm Mr. Burton, delighted to have you with me today. 5.8 Project Management, the last in our installment of the Operations Management unit of the course. Let's get going. Project management. Project management is all about using modern management techniques to carry out and complete a project from start to finish in order to achieve preset targets of quality, time and cost. Now, examples of business projects may include setting up a new IT system, relocating the company operations, installing machinery, developing and launching a new product, and building a factory. Now, large assignments and developments, for example, the construction of motorways, commercial and residential property, always involve project management. It's the coordination of up to hundreds, even thousands of different jobs and tasks. Now, to be completed successfully, a project needs to be planned and managed, cost determined and times allocated. Problems need to be dealt with and eventually concluded. Formal methods of managing a project offer clear guidelines and deadlines, and the key elements of project management include defining the project carefully, including the setting of clear objectives, dividing the project up into manageable tasks and activities, controlling the project at every stage to check that time limits are being kept to, giving each team member a clear role, and finally providing controls over quality issues and risks. Failure to manage projects successfully can have serious consequences for any organization. Network analysis, referred to also as critical path analysis, is central to this 5.8 project management topic. If you are going to get a project management in the IB Business and Management exam, it is almost certainly going to involve network analysis. And it is frequently examined as well. Network analysis, or critical path analysis, this is a planning technique that identifies all tasks in a project, puts them in the correct sequence, and allows for the identification of the critical path. Essentially, it's about identifying the minimum amount of time needed to complete a project. And if we can identify the minimum amount of time needed, then we've got cost savings as well. We can work that minimum time frame into our budgets. To perform a network analysis, we need to identify all the operations required. We need to break down the entire project into separate jobs and tasks. We need to determine how long each task is going to take. Identifying all dependencies, dependencies are activities that can't start until others are completed. It's impossible to build a house until you've got the foundations laid. And we need to identify also those tasks which can be performed at the same time or concurrently. We're going to run you through this with quite a simple example. So baking a cake, we're looking at creating a network analysis, a network diagram. And this diagram is going to show the logical sequence of activities and the logical dependencies and identify the critical path. These projects are going to be bigger, more complicated, but baking a cake you're familiar with, you will be able to understand the whole process a lot more easily. So identify all operations required. Break down the project into simple jobs and tasks. Determine how long each task will take. Identifying all dependencies, activities that can't start until others are completed, and others which go on at the same time, all with baking a cake.
Show me.
Right, different activities. Now the IB Business and Management examination will specify activities. They will identify specific tasks and allocate times for these.
Show me.
Turning on the oven is our first task, takes some minutes.
Show me.
Find the ingredients and the cooking utensils, task B, 4 minutes.
Show me.
Mix ingredients in a bowl, 5 minutes.
Show me.
Put cake mix into baking tins, 3 minutes.
Show me.
Bake the cake mix, 20 minutes in the oven.
Show me.
Wash up the used utensils and perform a bit of a clean up, 10 minutes.
Show me.
Put away utensils and ingredients, 7 minutes. There's been a specification here that this must be carried out before cooling and eating, so keep that in mind.
Show me.
Remove cake from the oven and cool.
Show me.
Prepare a jam filling.
Show me.
Add the filling and serve. So, activity on the left. For simplicity's sake, we've labelled these as tasks A through to J, and time on the right as well. So it's time for each task to be from the start of that task to the completion of the task. B, C, D and E must be done in a certain order. These follow from each other. Now if we total up these times here from activity A through to activity J, we find that we've got a total of 60 minutes. So the naive project management team or planner would allocate 67 minutes of time for this project to be completed. But we do have something that we call parallel activities. Parallel activities are going to reduce the time. Parallel activities are those activities that can be run simultaneous with other activities. So whilst the cake mix is baking, we can do our washing and cleaning, we can put away the utensils and the ingredients as well. And critical activities, you can see the big bold terminology here. Critical activities will increase this time if delayed. So if we don't put our cake mix into the oven to bake, if we delay any time there, the cake still needs 20 minutes in the oven. So any time delayed getting that cake into the oven to bake is going to delay the whole project. That's why it'll be identified as a critical activity. And also there's likely to be some float time, and float time is terminology for free time to prepare for critical activities, ensure projects not delayed. Okay, we're constructing our network now. We've got our activities there in the right hand corner to remind us. This is the layout. Activity on the top, labelled as such, and the duration on the bottom of the arrow. We've got a node to start with, and that node is numbered. Now the numbers don't mean anything at all, just numbered for convenience. But what does mean something is EST, and it's the earliest start time of an activity. So activity X, we've got there, we've got the duration and the earliest start time of that activity. It's just numbered to make it easy to follow. It is not the task number. The task number is the activity which goes in between our nodes. Earliest start time, that the next task can begin. One node leads to another. Again, they're just labelled to make it easier to follow. They're not the task number. What is critical is between the nodes, the activity itself. I'll repeat that again. The nodes are not numbered with task numbers. The activity is what is critical, that is in between the two nodes. Our latest finishing time of the previous activity. So that's the latest finishing time. After this, the next task will be delayed. With that information, that's our starting point. We now go away and construct a network. We turn on the oven. We find the ingredients and utensils. Task C, we mix the ingredients in a bowl once we've found them. We put the cake mix into baking tins, task D. Task E, we put the cake mix in the oven. Have a look at this. Task F, we can wash the used utensils and clean up. Now we can do this after task A. Task G follows task F, so that's put away utensils and ingredients. And then after E and G, bake cake mix and watch utensils and clean up, we can proceed with task H. So task H, the start of that is dependent on both E and G being completed. Task I, we prepare the jam filling and we add the filling and serve. So essentially that's what we're doing. We're taking our tasks, we're looking at which is dependent on which being completed and laying the whole network out in a logical manner. So every task that needs to be preceded by a previous task is laid out as such. And then we go away and fill in our latest finishing times and our earliest start times. Okay. Right. Earliest start time, this is straightforward except for 6 where the two arrows converge. And this rule, we're going to add the longest time taken. Right. Always start at 0 times 0. It takes 1 minute for A to be completed, 4 minutes for B, so that's the earliest start time that C is 5 minutes, so that's 1 minute for A, 1 minute for B, 5 minutes. Earliest start time for D is 10 minutes, for E 13 minutes. 1 minute for task A, 10 minutes for task F. The earliest that G can start is 11. And we know that rule at the top, so take the longest time taken for where two arrows converge. And there we have our earliest start times in place. Very straightforward. Latest finishing times. we simply roll back. So 50 minutes to complete all of these activities, A through to J. We'll match that up, and now we just roll it back. So 50 minutes less 5 minutes for J to be completed, 45, less 2, 43, less 10, 33. 33 minus 7 will give us 26 minutes, and that's the latest finishing time for Jeep without getting any delays. 13, 10, 10 minus 5 is 5, 5 minus 4 is 1, and we are back to time 0. So this is what a network analysis, a network diagram looks like. The earliest start time is equal to the latest finishing time. The activities deemed to be critical. The latest finishing time, the same as the earliest start time of the next, becomes a critical path. So whenever you see an EST equaling an LFT, we have got a critical path. And this is what it's all about. We're identifying the critical path where there can be no delays in the project. We need to indicate the critical path, and traditionally, well, it's an IB Business and Management requirement that we indicate the path with these double dash parallel lines, which is, funnily enough, the exact opposite of decision trees. These parallel lines tell us the path not to take, but here with critical path they indicate the path that we should be taking, that critical path.
ABS Media Demo.
Right, so the baking cake, nice simple example. You know what you're doing, it's very easy to understand, which is why I used it. We're going to run you through a network diagram example here. And it took me many years to develop this, this process. It's great, it's super simple. Students find it bomb-proof. Those that are initially struggling with getting their head around laying out the critical part, the network analysis diagram, the network diagram, finds this way. Those students find this way quite straightforward, quite logical. Let's have a look. We've got our activities there, A through to J, and the duration in days on the right hand side. Preceding activities, so C can't begin until A is completed, D can't begin until B and C are completed, E precedes A, F precedes E, G can't get underway until F and D are completed, H can't get underway until B and C gets completed, I can't get underway until J and H are completed, and J needs to be preceded by I. So you can see that this one is quite a lot more complicated than the previous example. How do we go about laying that out? What we do is take out a piece of paper, tear them up into strips, tear these pieces of papers up into strips, and label them activity A through to activity J, or whatever activities are given to you in the exam questions. Now typically practicing this way a few times, you start to get the hang of laying out the logical sequence of events. But if you need to rely on this method that I'm going to show you now, there's no problem at all with you ripping up pieces of paper in the IB examination. It's not against the rules, right? You can do it, and you can use this practical alternative to just rolling up the network diagram. What am I rambling on about here? Let's have a look. Right, activities and preceding activities there. We've got our pieces of paper all nicely ripped up and laid out. Right, we can see that A has no preceding activities and neither does activity B. So these are going to be our two starting points. J is our ending point, and J is preceded by I and nothing else. Now for I to begin, it's specified there that G and H need to precede it. So you can see that we're putting our strips of paper just before I. C comes after A. And if we go to G, activity G, we can see that F and D, those activities precede G. And E is dependent on A being completed. So, by just shuffling around our strips of label paper, we have essentially got our activities laid out in the correct sequence, which is brilliant. And now we can just go ahead and put in our notes. Oh, just head back there. So now we've got it beautifully laid out. Beautifully laid out. And once we've got that structure in place, then all we are doing is getting out our rulers and drawing in our arrows, activity on the top, duration on the bottom of the arrow, now you can see with these strips of paper and with the activities labelled, it makes it very, very easy to shuffle bits of paper around. You make a mistake, you're not rubbing out anything, you're not scribbling out any pen marks. All you are doing is playing around with these strips of paper until you have the correct sequence in place. And that took me years to be able to this technique to be able to pass on to students. Absolute genius, makes it super easy. And once you've done it with this paper method 2 or 3 times in practice, then it becomes much easier to just lay out the network following what's going on in your mind. So there we have it. We've got the structure in place. And once we've got that, we are laying out our earliest start times and our latest finishing times. So what you see before you is just what we had on the preceding page, just looking a little bit nicer.
Show me.
Now remember, with the earliest start time, we're feeding forward to the longest route.
Show me.
We always start at time 0. Activity A takes 8 minutes to complete, so the earliest start time of activity E must be 8 minutes. 8 minutes for activity A, 14 minutes for activity E. The earliest start time for F is 32 days. Activity C was either going to be 6 minutes or or 20. So it's the longest one. Just rolling forward. 38 plus 4, 42.
Show me.
Earliest start time, tick that off your list. Latest finishing time, we're going to roll back to find the longest route. 42 equals 42. 42 minus 4. 38 minus 3. Now remember the rule, take the longest one. 35 minus 3. 35 minus 14 will give us the latest finishing time for activities C and B. 32 minus 10, the 10 days taken for activity F to be completed. 22 days minus 14 days is the latest finishing time for activity A without anything getting delayed. And 0 must equal 0. And there we have it. All we need to go through now and is identify the critical path. And remember, we identify our critical path where the EST, the earliest start times, and the LFTs, the latest finishing times, are equal. We can see that A, E, F, G, I, and J is become the critical part. There can be no delays there, or else we delay the entire project at some stage. And you will be awarded a mark for having a key, or you'll lose a mark for not having a key. So that's what your key should look like. However you are identifying the critical path, whether it's through extra bolded arrows, those double dash parallel lines, or any other method, just specify that in your key. Float time is free time. It's the longest an activity can be delayed from its own estimated earliest starting time without delaying the project. Calculating the latest finishing time, calculating the total float, we take the latest finishing time of a task, less the duration of that task, less the earliest start time of that task. So if we have a look down the bottom of that network diagram there, we can see that task F, we have the latest finishing time as being 26, the duration of task F being 10, and the earliest start time of task F being 1. So 26 minus 10 minus 1, we've got a total float of 15 minutes. So we don't need to undertake the start of task F for 15 minutes. We've got 15 minutes of messing around with start F, delaying things, getting things ready for it before it becomes critical. So if we have a look and we do the same thing with task G, what do we find? So it'll be the latest finishing time of G less the duration of task G minus the earliest start time of task G. Latest finishing time 33. 7 minutes to complete, that's the duration of task G. And the earliest start time must be 11. 33, 7, 11. Um, 33 minus 7 minus 11, 15 minutes. Now, total float isn't specific to an activity, but to an uninterrupted path. So it's no coincidence that F and G are both have total floats of 15 minutes. But we cannot delay both of them by 15 minutes, or else we're going to be delaying the whole project. So along that path that F and G lie on, we have 15 minutes of time when no activity is critical. Yep, we can't delay both F and G by 15 minutes. Free float. This is the longest an activity can be delayed without affecting the earliest start time of the following activity. The calculation, the earliest start time of the next activity less the duration minus the earliest start time of that particular activity. So the activity that we are looking at again is activity F. The earliest start time of the next activity and the earliest start time of that activity are the other numbers that we're interested in. So the free float for task F, 11 minus 10 minus 1, there is 0 minutes of free float. So if we don't want to delay the start of G, we need to get going straight away. The free float of G, remember it's the earliest start time of the next activity minus the duration of D minus the earliest start time of G itself. So 33, 7 and 11 are the numbers that we're interested in, and 15 minutes is the answer there. So what we can conclude from having a look at the free floats here, F can't be delayed without affecting the free time of G. Now, there's no free float time for task F. If we delay F in any way, then G can't start at its earliest possible time. Now that information can be used by managers to shift resources and ensure critical activities are completed on time. What you should do now is get out your Hong textbooks, and there's a nicely laid out activity where you come up with the critical path step by step. And the critical point to doing this is you do it without looking ahead. Once you start getting in a nasty habit of looking ahead, you think, oh yes, this is very easy. Oh yeah, that was obvious. Do it like this, do it like this. But it's only once you get the knack for doing it without looking at the answers, to not knowing what the critical network diagram looks like, that you really start to get a hang of these things. So work through the examples, don't look ahead. And once you've worked through that example in the Hong textbook, have a go at tackling question 5.8.1 and 5.8.2, 5.8.3 and 5.8.4. Honestly, the more practice you get with these things, the more automatic they become, the more routine, the easier it is to think about. Do go away and play with those strips of paper to help you out. They will help you think logically, set things out, and play around with different paths.
Show me.
Just an activity here that you can run through. So copy those down onto your piece of paper and then go away, pause the video now and come back and check the answer. Okay, dummy activities have tripped up tens of thousands of IB business and management students. I haven't seen a dummy activity in an IB examination, IB business and management exam, for quite a while now. I think as soon as I get thrown in, 90% of candidates get confused. But that's not to say that it won't be there in the future. It's not to say that you shouldn't be prepared for it, because you should. Dummy activities are important. I haven't seen them for a while, but they do show up. They do show up. So we define it as being a logical dependency between two indirectly linked tasks in a project. What is Mr. Burton talking about? Well, have a look. For an example, plumbing and electrical wiring work are independent of each other, but both need to be completed before walls of a house or a building can be plastered. So if the project is building a house, plumbing and electrical wiring, a plumber comes in, an electrician comes in, they work independently, but before the walls can go up, they both need to be completed. Now, a dummy activity, funnily enough, is not an activity at all. It's shown by a dotted line on a network diagram, and it doesn't consume time or resources. All, again, is just showing a logical dependency between other activities that must be included in certain networks to prevent some sort of illogical path from being created. It's much easier to show you. Right, example dummy activity. Let's say that the activities A and B are at the start of a project. They have no preceding activities. Now C follows A and D follows A and B. A and B are at the start of the project. They have no preceding activities. C follows A and D follows A and B. Now, this is what 90% of students would immediately come up with. It looks alright at first glance. It looks alright at second glance. You start to follow the dependencies through. It still looks okay. But it's only when you see that C does not need to be preceded by B that you think, hey, okay, we may have a problem here. We may be looking at a dummy activity. We may need to introduce our dummy activity into the network diagram. So both C and D require A and B to be finished, but C only requires A to finish before it can start. What this should look like is not that, but this. Right. So D requires both A and B to be completed. So we can see that there's an arrow there that goes from task A to the node dotted, indicating a dummy activity before D can start. So A and B are completed before D can get underway, but C only requires A to be finished before B can go. And we have got exactly why we need dummy activities to come into the network analysis. Yeah, so C starts when A is finished, but D has to wait before both A and B are finished. We've got a few examples in the Hong textbook for you to come to terms with. Got an example there, running you through one on page 727 through to 728. That's an example, and then you've got questions 5.84 and 5.85 to get you thinking for yourself. Give them a shot before looking at the answers. How many times have I given that piece of advice? Try them before looking at the answers. Once you look at the answers, everything looks completely logical. But you wouldn't be looking at the answers if it was that logical. Okay, and apart from being asked to construct a network diagram and identify the critical path, you are also going to be very likely to be asked about the value and the limitations of network analysis.
Show me.
On the website, we have got summary notes embedded there, so go along to ibbusinessandmanagement.com, download those summary notes. We're looking at the advantages of being able to perform a network analysis, and summary notes there about evaluating network analysis as a whole. I'm Mr. Burden. Very happy to have you with me today. I hope you learned something. If you do find that this network analysis is difficult, please try using those pieces of paper to help lay out the network diagram. And the more you play around with those pieces of paper, the less you're going to need them in the future. But if it's how you do it, if it's how you come to terms with a network diagram, there's no shame, there's no penalty for ripping up the back of your exam paper and labelling those with activities and then laying it out. Guarantee you. Okay, I'm Mr. Burton, and that's the end of Operations Management. Great having you with me.